Welcome into the Thunder basketball universe. We are recording this on Thursday, November 7th. So that means the Thunder has returned back from a one-off trip to Denver, which concludes kind of a hectic stretch to the season, which kind of can describe the entire start to the season, if I'm being quite honest. So the last time that we podcasted, the Thunder had just played against the Atlanta Hawks here at home. And so now the Thunder has gone through a stretch of 4 games and 6 nights. It included a back-to-back on the West Coast that included some really tough travel, came back home, played the Orlando Magic, and then shipped back out west into Mile High City to face off against the Denver Nuggets. So we have a lot to recap. A lot of things took place in between our last podcast, and we've got a lot to break down.
I know it really hasn't been that long, but it feels like a while since we podcasted, and that's because we've literally had no time. We haven't really been here. So sorry for if it feels like this is a delay, because the Thunder had 8 games in 14 days in effectively 6 different cities, Denver twice, but you had to go back there another time. So this team has been sort of constantly in motion over the first 2 weeks of the season. And so while the games keep on coming, at least this next 6-game homestand is a chance for the Thunder to catch its breath a little bit.
In a way. At least you're at home and sleeping in your own bed, but the Thunder's about to enter a 3-game and 4 night.
Correct.
Again, here at home, facing off against the Houston Rockets on Friday, then have a Sunday, Monday back-to-back. So the schedule, unrelenting. We all know this. This is the NBA. You got to fit 82 games into a season, and the Thunder's not the only team dealing with this, and they recognize that, which is why we've seen a lot of very resilient efforts by OKC throughout that really difficult 4-game and 6-night stretch. So we'll get into those. But first, since it's been a minute, let's recap some of the stats that have really jumped out of the page for us. Nick, what is your stat of the week?
Mine is 96.5.
Is that an incredibly good shooting percentage?
That was Paris Lawson's. That was Paris Lawson's shooting percentage from the free throw line in college.
I thought it looked familiar.
No, that is the Thunder's defensive rating, which I don't blame you for being confused about what that could be, because typically those numbers are not below 100.
Wow.
So even coming off of last night's game in Denver, where the Nuggets were able to score 124 points, the fact of the matter is the Thunder's defense has been far and away the best defense in the NBA so far this season. Michael Malone, in fact, kind of characterized it as that's like 1986 level defense. You just don't see these types of numbers for an extended stretch in the season like this. So a tenth of the way through the season, obviously a long way to go, but the Thunder has done a really nice job of making life difficult. As something that Mark Daigneault talked about before the season, Sam Presti talked about before the season, the thing that they look at, are we hard to score on?
Right.
And that's the number one thing that we're seeing here.
The thing that I really appreciate about the Thunder offense, and that number is exceptionally loud, and that's going to jump out immediately. But the thing that is not quite as tangible and a little bit invisible is the effort and the activity on that end of the floor. Watching it, I mean, we're courtside, so we see these guys running around, swarming, communicating, flying all over the court. Anytime I see Alex Caruso in the game, I'm kind of exhausted watching him defensively, because he's truly just all over the floor. And one stat, just to highlight, that is a little bit tangible, are the deflections. The Thunder leads the league in deflections per game. And it's
up above 20, right?
Up above 20. They're at 24.1.
That's crazy.
24.1 deflections per game. That is insanely disruptive.
When you think about that, that's like a deflection on a quarter of the opposing team's possessions, if you map it out like that.
And I'll give you a perfect example. Last night in Denver, especially in the first half, when OKC was really in control of that game, every entry pass to Nikola Jokic was just completely batted away, swatted at, bobbled. It was really troubled waters for Denver trying to get the ball inside to their best player. And it was just because the amount of bodies that the Thunder threw at Nikola Jokic. And obviously, the Thunder didn't always have Chet Holmgren out there, so there wasn't always a ton of size. But, I mean, the positional length on these guys, I mean, you've got Jalen Williams, you've got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Alex Caruso. Those guys have really long arms and can be really disruptive when they use them to their advantage. And they were really putting that on display against the Denver Nuggets.
You know, it's just striking me right now that I think we're going to have a homework assignment for our guy, Chris Josephson. He's our stats guy for our FanDuel Sports Network broadcast. I want to know what teams shoot, what their shooting percentage is, what their like points per possession look like after on a possession in which a defense made a deflection? I have to imagine that those points per possession, that field goal percentage for teams on possessions where there's a deflection that occurs compared to when there's not, is drastically different.
I would have to imagine, because it just adds so much of a disruption to a play call. And that instant second where you bobble the ball or it almost falls out of bounds, you have to save it. That just throws off your rhythm offensively and might mess up a play call.
And presses you back up against the shot clock, which everybody kind of talks about as the sixth defender. And so these are situations that the Thunder has really thrived in this year, where they're pressing teams to their limits offensively. And what's happening is a lot of then turnovers or just poor shots that have low percentage chances of going in.
And shots that you'll live with if they do go in, if you're the Thunder. So I have to imagine it's probably like, I'm gonna give CJ a break here. I'm gonna guess 95% of it leads to a stop for OKC if they get a deflection on a play.
We'll give you an answer next week.
Okay, we're gonna find out. All right. Speaking of Chris Josephson, got to give him a shout out on this one, because this stat of the week for me jumped out the page massively, especially last night. The number is 60%.
The percentage of opposing team star players that are very frustrated when they end a game against the Thunder.
Gallo, you know that number is higher than that. You know that one's like an 80, 90%.
Okay, all right.
This is the assist rate for the Thunder.
Oh, nice.
So it's not technically the actual assist rate, but the Thunder has had a 60% assist rate in 4 of its last 5 games. Great. And the reason I bring up CJ is because, A, this was in his awesome stat notes that he sends before each game. But also, during the Thunder's game last night against the Denver Nuggets, OKC, like, the ball was popping in the first half of that game. I mean, we were talking, it was hitting everybody's hands. We were getting really good shots. It was beautiful, beautiful basketball. And as a result, at the end of the first quarter, the Thunder had 11 assists on 12 made baskets. Incredible offense.
You love to see those kind of numbers. If you see that at the end of the first quarter, that's a really good indicator that the Thunder is executing offensively the way that they want to.
Exactly. And so I reached out to CJ because I was just like, look, this might be something that we need to track, because if it stays like this is going to be an incredible assist rate for OKC. And they ended up above 60%. I think it was around 66% assist rate for that night. But it's not just isolated to this one game for OKC. Yeah. Really the entire season, we have seen some incredible balanced scoring by the Thunder. We have seen guys get involved offensively who have just like popped, and just not guys that typically have those sort of offensive nights. But it goes to show that all of these guys are A, capable, and B, well involved within the offense. And this is a very selfless group that is just trying to get the best shot out there on the floor and yield some really quality looks.
Yeah, and the Thunder is a team that is attacking downhill constantly. Yeah. They lead the NBA in drives per game again this year. I think that's 4 years running now that the Thunder is right up there at the top in terms of drives per game. While not getting free throw attempts early, what that is doing is generating the attention that they want in the middle of the lane and allowing for those spray out passes. I mean, Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins, Lou Dort, who's been blistering hot from 3. All of these guys are really benefiting from those catch and shoot looks that they're getting out on the perimeter.
And a lot of these guys are getting more catch and shoot looks, like you're mentioning. And I think of a guy like Aaron Wiggins, Isaiah Joe, Lou Dort, all of these guys kind of growing in their volume of those catch and shoot looks and taking advantage of them, stepping into them with confidence and knocking them down.
Yeah, one note on that, Aaron Wiggins has doubled his 3-point attempts from last season to this season. About 1.5 per game last year. He's up above 3 per game this season. That is something that's so interesting to hear about before the season, that guys, Coach Mark Daigneault and Aaron himself were talking about, hey, like, this is something that we want to do.
Yeah.
For that to then actually happen in practice, the game is not something that you can just orchestrate and decide, like, this guy's getting this many shots and this guy's getting that many shots. This guy's playing this many minutes. For that to happen organically when they've set out that this is something that they want Aaron to do, and for it actually to happen in the early going, I find that pretty impressive.
Can we stay on Aaron Wiggins for a second? Sure. He had a play. Can you tell the people about the Aaron Wiggins theory?
Yeah. So if you see Mark Daigneault chuckling on the sideline, it's most likely at Aaron Wiggins or with Aaron Wiggins. There's sort of a laughing at and with thing that goes on there.
Aaron's probably chuckling a little bit too.
They have a great relationship. Mark has a great relationship with all these guys, but those two, there's a little something about, they kind of
there's a knowing look like,
So there was a play a few games ago where, Aaron was kind of kicking the ball around on the perimeter.
Yeah.
He ended up collecting the loose ball, and
it was kind of a broken play. It was just things were not going well.
And Aaron, to be honest, broke it.
Yeah.
He was the breaker of the play.
Yes.
But you know what? He was also the fixer of the play.
He was the hero.
And this is sort of Mark Daigneault's Wiggins theory, is that things might go sideways, but if Aaron Wiggins is involved, he's probably going to pull something out of a hat,
yes,
and make something out of nothing. And that's when Mark really starts to chuckle on the sideline. And it's Mark usually has a pretty stoic look on the sideline.
Yeah.
So to see him grin or chuckle is a big deal.
So there was the shot, and Aaron was quite literally falling down, one-handed, contested, shot clock wind. I mean, I saw it in slow motion as it happened. And then the ball goes through the hoop, and you just think that right there is why the Thunder is so comfortable giving Aaron Wiggins more opportunity offensively. Because he's not going to take bad shots. I mean, and even that shot, it's funny, but it's also he can make that shot. He's perfectly capable. He's a great offensive player. But on top of that, he is so well within the Thunder system. Yep. And he has turned into such a strong system player. He's going to take only the shots that come to him. He's not going to go out and, be inefficient. And it's led to, over the last 2 years, Aaron shooting 50% from the field, 40% from three. He's putting up some incredible numbers. And this season, he's been allowed to kind of expand that volume offensively. And we're, like you mentioned, doubled his 3-point attempts. But we're still seeing incredibly efficient numbers. And I just think that is such a really cool thing to see with Aaron, because his approach has remained the exact same. He's not taking worse shots. He's just taking more good ones.
Yeah. After each game, I kind of track plays, some of the best plays from the game. And I have little headers, and, some of them are about, great ball movement or Lou Dort, tenacious defense. I have a Wiggins theory, one, and then I also have a Aaron Wiggins efficiency monster, one, because that's what he is.
I need a t-shirt with that.
Yeah. He just is a monster when it comes to efficiency, and it's an amazing story about player development, because he was not efficient when he walked into the Thunder.
Right.
He was the 55th pick in the draft, and he, was on a 2-way contract, needed to spend some time with the Blue, but basically from day one, he internalized what the Thunder asked him to do in order to turn himself into a more efficient player, a system player, someone that could master those system fundamentals. And within the span of, maybe less than 12 months, he had transformed his game into one that was really compatible with what the group wanted to accomplish. And he's only excelled even further at that, which is extremely impressive.
I've talked to Aaron about that process for him, and I asked him just that had to have required a lot of patience, right? I mean, this man's in his 4th year, right?
Yeah.
There's 3 years here where you are, really developing your game. You're refining your game, kind of trimming things down. And that, for a lot of young players, can be frustrating. It can get tedious. It can get boring. And Aaron has never shown any signs of, discomfort or frustration. Instead, he just has flourished and thrived. And he was like, yeah, it took a lot of patience, but I knew that I had the confidence of my teammates and I had the confidence of my coaches. And, he's working with David Akinyoye on, all the different types of shots that he needs to finish as under assistant coach. And here he is kind of reaping the benefits of that.
He doesn't fit the bill of what, the NBA sort of has this viewpoint of a 6th man of the year, this microwave scorer off the bench. But here's Aaron Wiggins' numbers so far this season. 10.5 points on 19.9 minutes per game, 52% shooting from the field, 40% from three. I mean, if you talk about microwave scoring, that's it right there. And that's efficient scoring off the bench, impactful. He's into double figures. And oh, by the way, he's a really solid and aggressive and pesky defender as well. So perhaps rewriting what, being sort of that sixth man could be. The cool thing is he's not always the sixth man. Sometimes he's in the starting lineup.
Very true.
Sometimes he's, the ninth guy that's injected in the game. Last year, we saw times that he was inserted in the game at the beginning of the fourth quarter for the first time all night.
Yeah.
Still manages to make an impact.
able to bring so much consistency in such an inconsistent role. That is such a skill that is so valuable for any team to have, in Aaron showcasing that big time at the outset of the season. All right, let's change gears here a little bit and let's flash back last night. Don't have to flash back very far. Just a few hours ago. So the Thunder was in Denver and it dropped its first game of the season. So the Thunder is 7-1 now, but it was also the Thunder's first clutch game of the season. Side note, the Thunder had won every game up to that point by double figures. So this is a really, really good experience moment for OKC for them to be able to go through this. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, but they had a lot of things that they were exposed to in this game that is very beneficial. They have it on film. They can go back and watch. But this clutch time opportunity for the Thunder was really, really impressive. They were down by 8 points with about a minute, 45 seconds left. And then next thing you know, Shea has an opportunity to tie the game at the buzzer. Yeah,
I think if you look at what the score was heading into clutch time, I think what the Thunder ended up doing was winning clutch time technically by 1 point.
Right.
So, that's good. Even in a loss, you're able to win that clutch time scoring. And, you had a chance to tie the game at the buzzer with the ball in your best player's hands. So, you're going to live with that on the road in a tough environment, in a slew of 8 games in 14 nights like we've talked about. The teachable takeaway for the Thunder in this game was what happened in the previous 43 minutes of the game,
right?
Namely transition defense, which I felt like last night was a bit of an anomaly for the Thunder and typically what they do in that category. Mm-hmm. Denver was able to score 21 fast break points. That's basically unheard of over the last handful of years in Thunderland.
Yeah, and the other thing about that, Denver really lit it up from behind the arc in the third quarter. A lot of different guys getting involved. Michael Porter Jr., Julian Strawther. A lot of guys, Christian Brown. And so the shot-making element was something that you can't always control, right? But in talking to Coach Dagnall at postgame, he said, we got a little bit loose defensively, and particularly in that third quarter because the Thunder were plus 11. They were leading by 11 going into halftime, and the defense was really strong. Offensively, they put together a 32-point quarter, a 34-point quarter, so things were really flowing. The offense hit a little bit of a lull in the third quarter, and to your point, Coach Dagnall said postgame, in order to maintain some strong transition defense, you got to play some good offense to give yourself a chance. Yeah. Because if you're taking, tough shots, if it's late shot clock, if they get stops, that just ignites easy looks out in transition for guys like Nikola Jokic who like to pitch the ball ahead out in transition off a rebound, or a guy like Russell Westbrook who is going to really just kind of hit the pedal to the metal downhill.
Yeah, the Thunder, tried to build walls in transition, but a lot of times there were scramble floor situations. There were 5-on-4 fast breaks, which doesn't always feel like a fast break, but when you've got guys who play with the speed and tenacity that Denver had in the perimeter last night, and frankly, young guys who are really, really hungry to prove themselves in this league, there's a slew of guys on that Denver team who are desperate to be in the rotation for that team. They've got a couple guys who are out right now, and this is their proving ground opportunity. We always talk about sort of the emotional intelligence of this Thunder team, and Mark talks about being able to tap into sort of the emotional state of the opposing team, have that competitive empathy. Well, another great lesson here at the beginning of the season of the importance of that. And don't be alarmed or surprised by the fact that there are some things, by the way, in a 7-1 start, that the Thunder is still kind of relearning and recalibrating. Yeah. The whole point going back to training camp was this team is starting back at 0, and they have to relearn these fundamentals from the start so that they're built back up over the course of the season to be ready for April and hopefully beyond.
The goal is constant improvement.
Right.
That's the goal for the Thunder each and every night. Stacking games, stacking days. That's what they mean when they say stacking those days, because every single opportunity to be out there on the floor is a chance to learn. And Denver in this game last night, no different. There were a few bright spots that are worth pointing out. As I mentioned earlier, the scrappy defense in the first half of this game, it was exhausting for Denver, clearly. But another element that I want to point out is Isaiah Joe's effort. He was in the starting lineup for the Thunder in this game. He was also in the starting lineup in the regular season opener at Denver about a week and a half ago. And Isaiah Joe, obviously known to be a pretty well-known knockdown shooter. This man had 4 offensive rebounds in this game. He was all over the floor. It was so fun to watch.
Amazing. The lightest guy on the floor, flying in, throwing his body around, and generating extra possessions for the Thunder. There was one sequence where he grabbed one and ended up being so patient underneath the basket, so strong with the ball, he was able to create a dunk for Chet Holmgren under the rim after that second chance opportunity. So this has been a really nice stretch for Isaiah Joe. He hit 3 threes last night. He, over the last week or so, has played extremely well. He was great on the road trip, knocking down threes. Against Orlando, he went on that sort of personal 9 straight point scoring binge. His movement off the ball has been sensational. And it's just so interesting to think about all of the different positions that he's put himself in to be able to generate points. You'll see one of the Thunder's favorite plays is to have him out top as a screener for Shea or for J-Dub. And he's going to fly off of that screening action. And immediately the opposing team is put into this horrible decision of, what do we do?
What now?
Do we keep 2 on the ball here to prevent Shea or J-Dub from getting downhill? Or do we make sure that we're flying out and preventing what is very likely going to be a wide open shot for Isaiah Joe?
And talking to Isaiah Joe, and obviously he always has been a shooter, right?
Yeah.
So this is not new for him to be able to knock down shots left and right. It's all of the other things that go into being Isaiah Joe out there on the floor. If he was just a shooter, he would not be playing the minutes that he's playing. But he's a guy that screens very well, like you mentioned, knows how to leverage his gravity. So if you watch Isaiah Joe on a possession, which I do recommend, keep an eye on how this man moves, how he's finding windows. He's also cutting his movement without the ball. And we talked to him about this. Nick, I think you might have asked this question to him about his movement without the basketball. And he said, I move because I could get an open shot, but also because I know it opens things up for my teammates. That is such a selfless mentality to have, recognizing that all of that movement for you might not end up in a good look for you, but might open up the lane for somebody else.
Yeah, because I don't know about you, but I'm not interested in that much running in that such short a period of time.
Tired.
But Isaiah Joe, he doesn't mind it, and he conditions his body every summer to be able to handle that type of cardio inside of a game. Which, by the way, again, he's the lightest guy out there on the floor. The other team's trying to bump him around. They're trying to knock him off his spots. They're trying to make him uncomfortable. Well, if he's quicker than the rest of them, that sure prevents a lot of that bumping, and he's able to open up things for his teammates. Just like what we were describing about that high screen that he's able to set.
Yeah.
His movement and activity and quickness operating in that out top really can help generate some downhill pathways for teammates.
One quick side note, and this is something that I've been wanting to get into the broadcast, but just haven't been able to. I think it was during the preseason, maybe during training camp, we were talking about Isaiah Joe and how he shoots so many contested shots and they all go in. I mean, like, the book is out on Isaiah Joe, right? Everyone knows he's going to shoot. So all
he's
of
a 40+% three-point
he's
shooter.
not going to get wide open threes. And so he was asked, how do you make sure that, how are you able to make these contested threes? He's like, look, I'm a shooter. So if they don't block it, it's supposed to go in.
Right.
That's my mentality.
That's the job of the ball.
Literally. It's like, if it doesn't go in, it's not because it was a contested shot. It's because that's something that I did. And I love that mentality from Isaiah Joe. And you can see it out there on the floor.
And that's what these guys practice all summer long. I mean, we talked to J-Dub about how he's been able to operate and orchestrate his shots, his offense in tighter spaces. I feel like that's a step up for him in the way he's been able to handle the ball, get shots off in the lane, kind of free throw line area. He said he basically stole a workout technique from Shea, which is when you watch Shea work out at the end of practice, it's him going 1-on-5.
There's probably 4 coaches in just Shea offensively and 4 coaches defensively.
Yeah, and they are sort of positioned strategically on the court for Shea to try to weave in and out of. They're going to come contest him in certain places. He's got to work on all of those finishes, the unorthodox ways that he's got to get the shot up in the air. And that's not because Shea does a lot of 1-on-4 or 1-on-5 basketball during a game, but there are plays in which that is required at the end of the shot clock, or because an advantage was created, Shea is going to be put in some of these positions. Well, J-Dub, he is as well. And I think that's a nice segue into the other topic that we wanted to discuss from the game in Denver.
That is perfectly done, Gallo. We want to talk about Jalen Williams because in that game, J-Dub had a double-double. He finished with 29 points. He had 10 rebounds, I believe. Is that correct? 10 rebounds, 9 assists, 3 steals. Talk about a well-rounded performance. I mean, obviously, we knew this about J-Dub. He's been versatile since day one, but in this game, it was a very, very loud performance.
He's really been stuffing the stat sheet across a wide variety of categories throughout the course of the season so far. This was perhaps one of the most impressive performances for him to this point. because the Thunder really needed as much offense as they could get in this game. And J-Dub was a really massive catalyst for that. The way he ran the floor, he hit a massive catch and shoot three as a trail man late in this game. To have the energy and the juice to do that when he was defending at the level that he was during the course of the game, when he was attacking downhill, getting to his spots in the mid-range the way that he was, I found that very impressive. And he had to go get a bucket too late in that kind of personal 5-0 run to chip that Denver lead from 8 back down to 3 and give the Thunder a chance late.
Coach Dagnall said post-game that J-Dub had a really good floor game, but it was also his defensive versatility that really helped the Thunder throughout this game, especially in clutch time. He can bounce around to just about any guy out there on the floor. He's increased his physicality. He's obviously, his IQ just continues to grow on that end of the floor as he continues to see more pictures. And so it's just really sharp for him on that end of the floor and very, very valuable for the Thunder to have.
Yeah, and this is a guy that has shown year over year over year since he was like 5'11" as a senior in high school, that he is going to get better. And the fact that he transformed his game as his body transformed over the course of his time at Santa Clara to where he is now as a guy that is obviously a bona fide primetime two-way player, big-time scorer in the NBA. It's really impressive to see the work that he's put into his craft.
And just continues to put it on display. I mean, we saw it in the first quarter against Orlando. He kind of came out of the gates flying. He had 14 points in that frame. But again, it's all within the system. It's never just on his own accord. And I think that's what makes this team so unique, is that everyone is in harmony with one another and bought into the system and into the team as a whole. Yeah,
and I think he's one of the many guys on this team who has built up a perspective over the course of their years here. There's an understanding that these games are long, the season is long, and so there's no overreaction to any of these outcomes. Not the dominant defense against San Antonio and Orlando and the LA Clippers, not the amazing offensive explosion that this Thunder team had up in Portland, nor a tough loss out in Denver. None of those things are going to be overreacted to. It's going to be about what happened in the course of the 48 minutes, how they can build on what went well, and how they can learn from what didn't go well.
And that's the task for the Thunder now as they start a lovely 6-game homestand. As we talked about earlier, let's give you what's coming up next for this group. The start of a 6-game homestand starts on Friday here inside of Paycom Center against the Houston Rockets. That'll be a really fun game for OKC. Houston playing pretty well this season and showing a lot of young talent also growing as well.
They just have so many guys that are developing, that they have some veterans, a mix of those veterans and these young guys that are incredible athletes that have so much potential. And it's an amazing thing to see them all kind of trying to work out how those puzzle pieces are going to fit together and compete together with that.
So that'll be a good test for OKC. As we mentioned, it starts a 3-game and 4-night schedule for them because they've got Saturday off, but then it's Sunday, Monday for them, taking on the Golden State Warriors and the LA Clippers. And it's also a really long stretch for the Thunder going up against Western Conference opponents, which I think it's like 15 or 16 games straight, which is very interesting. It's going to be some tough opponents for the Thunder. Western Conference, obviously, very, very challenging.
Yeah, the way I characterized it last night on the broadcast is the Western Conference is like a maze of tripwires. And every single night in the West, you're going to have to deal with some annoying thing that you're like is different than what it was the night before. And it causes you have to sort of make sure that your system is bending to the way that you have to either defend or attack that specific opponent. There are no nights off in the Western Conference. And, even some of the teams that are sort of at the bottom of the standings right now have players or strategies or hunger or any quality that makes you go, geez, we got to deal with these guys tonight. And that's really fertile soil for the Thunder to really be digging into right now at this stage of the season, because they're going to need every single one of these experiences come the end of the year.
So if you want to get a good look at the Thunder's adaptability, their fluidity, these next 15 games are going to be a really good opportunity to do just that. But that wraps up today's podcast. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much to our producer, Matt Bishop. And until next time, Thunder up, and catch you later.